They laughed at her. Two billionaires jokingly asked the 7-year-old waitress's daughter for financial advice, expecting a childish answer, maybe something to laugh about. But when she opened her mouth, the entire restaurant went silent. What she said next, no one, absolutely no one, was prepared for. Before we dive in, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching this from? I'd love to know. The winter evening at Silver Pine Resort wasn't like any other night. Snowflakes drifted lazily outside the tall windows, while wealthy guests filled the restaurant with the soft sound of expensive laughter. In one corner, a grand fireplace burned gently, glowing against golden walls. On this particular night, two men sat at a private table near the glass balcony, two powerful names known quietly across the world of money. Henry Vale, loud and confident, wore his ego like his designer coat. Next to him sat Oliver Brooks, less noisy but equally powerful in the business world. They had built companies, bought countries' worth of land, and invested in every technology that promised a future. Tonight they were celebrating another victory, numbers so big they didn't even sound real anymore. Their plates glittered, their wine glasses sparkled. They spoke softly about billions, as if the word meant nothing more than bread. Waiters moved carefully around them, frightened to breathe too loudly in front of such men. But among all these people, one tiny person walked with a tray almost as tall as her. Her name was Lila Carter. Just 7 years old, tiny feet inside worn shoes, braids bouncing against her small shoulders. She helped her mother in the restaurant every evening after school. No one had hired her, of course. She just walked around with a determined face, setting napkins, carrying water, smiling shyly at guests. Most people found it cute. Some ignored her completely, but this night would not be normal. This night, the universe was preparing something unexpected. Lila walked toward the billionaire's table, with a silver jug taller than her arm. Her mother, Maria, watched nervously from the corner, fearing someone might complain about a child working, but Lila insisted every evening that she could help. "Mama, I want to be useful," she would say in her soft, almost musical voice. Henry noticed her tiny hands trying to pour water into his glass. He smirked. He always enjoyed entertainment. He leaned back dramatically. "Hey, little waitress," he said loudly enough for the nearby tables to hear. "Why don't you tell us where we should invest our millions next?" His friend Oliver chuckled under his breath, not intending cruelty but still amused. A few people around the table laughed too. Lila blinked. Only for a second. Then she looked up at Henry with the most serious eyes a child could have. Brown, thoughtful, too wise for her age. "Well," she said softly, "it depends if your money is meant to grow fast or if you want it to stay safe." The entire table went still. Henry forgot to breathe. Oliver leaned forward. Even the waiter behind her stopped walking. No 7-year-old should be able to answer anything like that, but Lila wasn't finished. "If you want your money safe," she continued calmly, "you should put it into things people will always need, like medicine and food. Those don't stop when the world changes." Oliver's eyes widened. "And if you want fast money," she added, "you should look at new ideas that help the planet. People like clean things now." Clean things. Simple words, but the message was powerful. Something about the way she spoke held the room. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't childish guessing. It felt like logic, real logic. Henry's smile faded. He looked at her carefully now, as if noticing her for the first time. "Where did you learn something like that?" Oliver asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Lila shrugged gently. "My dad taught me before he went to heaven." Silence dropped over the table like snow. Maria froze from across the room, her heart tightening. Henry cleared his throat, suddenly awkward. He looked away, pretending to check his phone, but his hands shook slightly. "Very cute," he muttered, trying to regain his pride. Kids these days pick up anything online. But Oliver didn't look amused anymore. He watched the child walk away with a slow, thoughtful stare. He whispered, "Henry, that wasn't random. She actually made sense." Henry forced a laugh. "Oliver, she's a kid, probably heard grown-ups talking." Oliver didn't answer, because he had a strange feeling in his stomach, a feeling he only got when something important had just happened. Meanwhile, Lila went back to her mother, placing the jug down with a proud smile. "I didn't spill anything, Mama," she whispered. Maria hugged her gently. "Sweetheart, try not to speak too much around those men." "Why?" Lila asked innocently. "Because rich people don't like being corrected," Maria answered quietly, "especially by someone small." Lila glanced at Henry across the room. His laughter had disappeared completely. He sat thinking, brows pressed together as though he was trying to solve a puzzle. "I didn't correct him," Lila murmured. "He asked me." "Yes," her mother sighed. "But some questions aren't real questions. They're jokes." Lila didn't fully understand, but she nodded anyway. Henry tried to shake off what happened and continued eating, but the words kept echoing in his head. Safe money in medicine. Fast money in clean ideas. Who even says things like that? Professionals maybe, not children. He leaned closer to Oliver. Maybe her dad worked in finance. Oliver shook his head. No, that wasn't repeating. That was understanding. Henry swallowed hard, uncomfortable with the idea that a 7-year-old might know something he didn't. He wasn't used to feeling small. In fact, he had spent his life proving he was the smartest in every room. But today, the smallest person in the room made him doubt himself. That night, when the resort lights dimmed and tables were cleaned, Henry couldn't sleep. He lay awake in his expensive suite, replaying the moment over and over. Who was that little girl? Where did she learn about investments? And why did her answer sound smarter than half the advisors he paid millions to? Far in another wing of the resort, Oliver stood silently at his window, staring into the snowy darkness. He wasn't thinking about the deal they just won. He wasn't thinking about profits. He was thinking about a child whose father had gone to heaven and left his wisdom behind inside her tiny voice. But no one, not even Lila, knew that destiny had just placed her on a path that would shake both billionaires to their core. She was only a child, yes, but she carried the last teachings of a man whose knowledge the world never got to see. Sometimes greatness doesn't appear in boardrooms. Sometimes it wears small shoes. Sometimes it carries a water jug. And sometimes it answers a joke as if the world depended on it. Snow melted slowly on the wooden roof of Silver Pine Resort, and winter mornings smelled like fresh coffee and pine trees. While wealthy guests slept late in their luxury suites, Maria Carter woke up before sunrise, preparing the small breakfast section with soft, tired hands. Lila, still half asleep, tied her braids herself and slipped into her worn shoes. Maria wished she could let her daughter rest, be a child, play with toys instead of napkins, crayons instead of menus. But life had chosen a difficult path for them. So Lila worked beside her mother every morning and afternoon. She never complained, not once, but something unexpected was happening since that strange night with the billionaires. They came back. Henry Vale returned first, pretending he had simply enjoyed the food. Oliver followed, saying he liked the calm atmosphere, but everyone could see the way they always asked to sit in Lila's section, always glanced around until they spotted her tiny figure walking among tables. They didn't request fine wine or special dishes anymore. They waited for Lila. One morning, as she approached their table, Oliver smiled kindly. "Good morning, Miss Lila. Any early market advice today?" Henry smirked. "Yes, tell us which toys are worth investing in," he joked, trying to sound funny. but something nervous hid behind his voice. Lila just blinked. Toys are only valuable if children stop liking screens, but I don't think that will happen soon. Oliver almost spit out his coffee. Henry stared like she had spoken another language. It kept happening. Every visit, every comment. Her replies sounded strangely intelligent, simple yet meaningful, like she was explaining big ideas in little words. And that was exactly what made it impossible to ignore. Later that afternoon, inside the resort's private lounge, Henry lowered his voice. "There's something strange about that kid." Oliver nodded. "I know." "Maybe. Someone is teaching her. Some advisor? A hidden genius parent?" Henry suggested. Oliver looked at him seriously. "Henry, we need to find out." Henry's pride felt challenged. He had spent decades proving himself smarter than everyone. Now a child had made him question himself. That fact hurt more than he wanted to admit. "Fine, I'll call someone." Quietly. Oliver said nothing, but his heart beat a little faster. He wasn't sure if this curiosity was business or something deeper. That night, while Maria and Lila walked home through cold wind, Henry was inside his penthouse making a phone call. "I need information on a family, the Carters. Anything you can find." He spoke like he was ordering room service. Oliver wasn't proud of the idea, but he wanted answers too. Just not the same answers as Henry. His interest wasn't based on suspicion. It was respect, a deep fascination with a mind that simply should not exist at 7 years old. Inside their small apartment, Lila sat at the kitchen table with worn notebooks, her father's notebooks. Old pages filled with numbers, little graphs, simple sentences explaining investments, markets, and futures. The handwriting was firm, careful. Every page felt like a piece of him, still living with her. Sometimes she traced the letters with her small fingers, imagining he was sitting beside her. Maria watched quietly from the doorway, eyes soft and sad. "Baby, it's late." "I just want to finish the last page I left yesterday," Lila whispered, without lifting her head. Her mother swallowed emotions that threatened to escape. "Okay, 5 minutes," she said, knowing she would never stop her anyway. Lila wasn't learning from textbooks. She was learning from love her father left behind in those pages. He used simple language, the kind a child could understand. People will always need food. Medicine is never optional. The future belongs to ideas that help the planet. She memorized every sentence. She carried them like treasure. She didn't know that the biggest businessmen in the country were now chasing her knowledge. 2 days later, Henry came again. This time he pretended to casually ask questions while Lila served them water. "So, little one, what would happen if all countries start using electric cars?" Lila thought for a moment. "Then the companies that sell oil might get scared, and scared companies make strange decisions." Oliver almost laughed, not because she was funny, but because she was right. Henry exchanged glances with Oliver. "This is impossible," Henry whispered. "Either she's hearing all this somewhere, or she's a genius." Oliver leaned forward. "What if she really is?" Henry looked irritated, but also afraid of being less powerful than a little girl. Slowly, something unexpected happened. Oliver began respecting Lila. Henry began resenting her, not openly, not loudly, but jealousy was growing like a quiet storm. When a child threatens a billionaire's ego, the world becomes unbalanced. One day, Oliver asked gently, "Who taught you such things, Lila?" "My dad," she said simply. "I remember him when I read." "And where is he now?" Oliver asked. "He's with the stars," she answered, pointing upward with her tiny finger. Even Henry couldn't joke after that. One late evening, while Oliver reviewed documents in his suite, Henry received a message from his investigator. He opened the report expecting some secret story, some mysterious background. But instead, the file said, Father, deceased, accountant, lower income, no known influence. Mother, single, works multiple jobs, no connections, no private tutors, no financial relatives, no wealthy background. Henry frowned hard. This doesn't make sense. Oliver skimmed the pages. So she's ordinary? Henry shook his head slowly. No, ordinary children don't talk this way. Oliver gazed into space for a moment. Maybe we're the ordinary ones. Henry rolled his eyes, but something inside him twisted. Anger, envy, fear. Maybe all three. People in the restaurant started whispering about the girl who spoke like a financial expert. Guests watched her with quiet curiosity. Some asked Maria questions about her daughter. Others simply stared in disbelief as the child explained things adults could barely understand. Maria kept trying to protect Lila from unwanted attention, but children do not know how to hide gifts. They shine naturally, and sometimes shining becomes dangerous. Henry became obsessed. Oliver became inspired. And Lila, she remained the same, innocent, helpful, unaware that two powerful men were studying her every word as if she were a secret code that could unlock endless treasure. But destiny was preparing something much bigger than anyone yet understood, because one billionaire wanted to use her, and one was about to need her. The snow outside had melted into soft spring rain, and the Silver Pine Resort changed from white and quiet into something bright and full of life. But inside the minds of the two billionaires, things were far from peaceful. Each visit to the restaurant only made the invisible tension stronger. Oliver watched Lila with gentle interest, listening to her tiny explanations as if they were rare diamonds. Henry listened too, but his reasons were darker. He no longer asked playful questions. Now they were tests. Every sentence she spoke made him more suspicious. Then one morning Henry arrived with excitement glowing through his expensive suit. He leaned close to Oliver, almost shaking with confidence. A new global project, he whispered. Huge profits. We'll crush the market with this. Oliver raised an eyebrow. You're sure? I have inside sources, Henry said proudly. Technology from overseas. Clean energy machines that promise unbelievable returns. If we invest now, we win everything. Oliver felt uneasy. Henry's excitement was dangerous. His decisions were fast, sharp, and often risky. Oliver preferred patience, but money had a way of convincing even calm people. Still, something inside him whispered a warning. Later that evening, they found themselves seated once again in Lila's section. She approached with a jug of lemon water, her braids bouncing the same innocent way, unaware of the fire burning between the two men. Henry suddenly tapped the table. Lila, listen carefully. Suppose a country promises new technology, clean energy devices, huge global demand. If someone invests billions early, is it smart? Lila blinked, thinking deeply, like she always did before answering. Sometimes promises are only words, she said quietly, and words can be soft like clouds. You can't hold a cloud. Oliver stared at her, startled by the simplicity of the metaphor. Henry laughed sharply, like her answer annoyed him. But clouds turn into storms, little girl. Lila shook her head slowly. Storms are loud, but they don't last. Trees last longer. Henry's smile faded at once. He wasn't sure if she was speaking nonsense or hiding something brilliant. Oliver felt something tighten inside his chest. He leaned forward. Lila, why do you think it's dangerous? She looked at them, her eyes too calm for a child. When people rush to something new, they forget to check if the ground under their feet is strong. Sometimes the ground breaks before they notice. Henry scoffed loudly, embarrassed by how her words suddenly made him doubt himself. Yet he couldn't admit it. Billionaires don't admit fear, especially not to a child. Oliver whispered, "Maybe she's right." Henry snapped back, "She's a little girl, Oliver. I didn't spend my life studying finance just to be warned by someone who can't even reach the top shelf." The words cut the air like a knife, and Lila lowered her eyes. Maria watched from the side, her heart breaking a little. Oliver swallowed hard. He respected Henry, but something inside him, something quiet, knew that hurting a child to protect his own ego was not strength. It was fear dressed as pride. The next day, the news spread fast. Henry had invested nearly half his empire into the new global project. Oliver hesitated, holding his pen over a contract, remembering Lila's voice. Sometimes promises are only words. His hands trembled slightly as he looked at the document. Then, at the last moment, he walked away. Henry called him foolish. Days passed, then weeks. Oliver felt guilty for doubting his friend, yet relieved he had trusted his instinct. But nothing prepared them for what came next. One afternoon, the television in the resort lounge suddenly displayed breaking news graphics. Guests turned their heads toward the screen. Oliver, who stopped by for coffee, froze mid-step. Henry's project, the clean technology investment, was collapsing. The overseas company was exposed for false promises and illegal practices. Investors across the world were screaming, numbers falling like stones in the sea. Henry lost everything in hours. Oliver watched in shock as reporters described the failure. Guests whispered. Phones rang. Wealthy people gasped. Henry arrived at the resort in a storm of anger, panic, and humiliation. He slammed doors, shouted at staff, demanded explanations from people who had nothing to do with the disaster. And then, like lightning searching for the tallest tree, his rage found Maria. "Your daughter gave stupid advice," Henry shouted, pointing toward Lila across the restaurant. "She ruined everything. She made me doubt. She tricked me." Maria stood frozen, shielding Lila behind her. "Sir, she is a child. Please calm down." Henry leaned closer, terrifyingly close. "That child thinks she's smarter than the world. Well, look what happens when little minds pretend to play with big things." Oliver rushed forward, pulling Henry away. "Stop, she warned you." Henry stared at him with burning eyes. "You believed her too." "And she saved me," Oliver said quietly. Silence spread around them. Every waiter stopped. Every guest stared. Henry's face twisted with pain. Pain of failure, pain of pride, pain of being wrong. Maria held Lila tightly. The child didn't cry. She looked up at Henry, her voice soft and almost forgiving. "Storms are loud. I'm sorry your clouds broke." Those simple words made Henry suddenly look old, tired, and defeated. He stepped back, realizing something he never wanted to admit. A child had understood more than he ever did. That night, Oliver found Maria and Lila outside the restaurant, waiting for the bus home. The evening air was cold, but gentle. Oliver knelt beside Lila. "You were right," he said. "Thank you for warning me." Lila didn't smile. "I'm sorry," he said. Oliver felt his throat tighten. Such innocence, such kindness. He whispered something he never thought he would say. "Lila, you saved me." She simply nodded, as if saving a billionaire was nothing unusual, as if she was just doing what her father taught her, to look at the world not with money, but with understanding. Oliver stood up, looking out into the dark road ahead. The rain was soft, just like her words, and in that moment he realized something that Henry never could. Sometimes the smallest voice becomes the loudest truth, and sometimes everything collapses, simply because someone refused to listen to a child who saw the world more clearly than grown men ever would. Summer slowly replaced the cold mountain air, and the Silver Pine Resort now smelled of warm grass and blooming flowers. But the sunshine outside didn't reach Henry Vale's world. Everything he once controlled began slipping through his fingers. Investors who once admired him stopped answering calls. Banks asked questions he couldn't answer. The media started calling his failure the most careless investment of the decade. His empire, built on years of pride and big wins, crumbled in front of him like paper left in rain. Oliver saw it happening from a distance. He felt no happiness in watching his friend fall. He remembered Lila's warnings, remembered how gently she had spoken, as if she wanted to protect, not destroy. He felt something new inside him, something he couldn't name at first. It was gratitude, yes, but more than that, it was responsibility. One evening, Oliver found himself walking into the modest neighborhood where Maria and Lila lived. It was the kind of place Henry would never step foot in. The air smelled like home-cooked food and old brick walls. Children played with chalk on the sidewalk. Nothing about it looked wealthy, yet it held a quiet kind of peace Henry had never known. Oliver stopped outside their small apartment and knocked politely. Maria answered, nervous, thinking something was wrong at the restaurant. But Oliver smiled gently. "May I come in?" Inside, Lila sat at the table with her father's old notebooks, reading them slowly like sacred treasure. Oliver looked at the pages, simple handwriting, small notes, clear thoughts. He could almost imagine the man who wrote them, a father teaching his daughter little truths about a big world. "I came to thank her," Oliver said softly, "and I came to ask if I can help." Maria's eyes filled with surprise and worry. "We don't want charity." Oliver shook his head. "Not charity, opportunity. I want to help other children who think like Lila. Smart children whose voices are ignored just because they're small." Lila looked up, her eyes shining. "Like a school." Oliver smiled. "Yes, maybe a place where children can learn things early, a place with teachers who listen." Maria covered her mouth to hide her emotion. Lila stared at Oliver like she was trying to decide if dreams were allowed to come true. "What would we call it?" Lila asked quietly. Oliver looked at the notebooks again. "The Carter Foundation," he said gently, "named after your father." That night felt like a new beginning. While Oliver planned something beautiful, Henry sat alone in his penthouse, only it didn't feel like a penthouse anymore. His assistant had quit. His phone wouldn't stop ringing with people demanding answers. But the deepest silence was inside him, a silence that felt like being forgotten. He blamed the world at first, then he blamed Oliver, then he blamed Lila. But blaming never fixed anything. Slowly, painfully, Henry began blaming himself for rushing, for mocking, for ignoring wisdom just because it came from someone smaller. Days passed, and one morning Henry returned to the resort, not for celebration, not for attention, but because something inside him needed closure. The restaurant was quieter that day. Lila wasn't working. Maria was cleaning tables herself. Henry walked slowly toward her. His voice was softer than anyone had ever heard. "Where is your daughter?" Maria hesitated, unsure if she should even speak to him, but she finally said, "She's at school." Henry sat down at an empty table and stared at his own hands. The man who once controlled billions looked as lost as a child. After a long silence, he whispered, "I'm sorry." Maria stopped wiping the table. She had waited weeks for something like this. Some understanding, some change. But she never expected to actually hear those words from a man like him. "She never wanted to hurt you," Maria said gently. "She only answered what you asked." Henry closed his eyes, and something inside him finally broke. Pride cracked open, letting humility breathe for the first time. Later, he left quietly without asking for anything. No advice, no forgiveness, no chance to justify himself. That small apology was the greatest thing he had left to give. Months passed. Across the city, Oliver launched the Carter Foundation. The first learning center opened in a bright building filled with sunlight and colorful walls. Children from simple families arrived every week, learning things they had never been taught before: science, financial basics, problem-solving, confidence. Everyone said the idea was genius, but Oliver always corrected them. The idea was hers, he would say, pointing to Lila. Lila became the youngest honorary speaker, standing on tiny stages, explaining things in her simple voice while adults listened with wide eyes. News reporters came, filming her in gentle wonder. She didn't pretend to be a genius. She only tried to make the world understandable the same way her father had done for her. Meanwhile, Henry rebuilt himself slowly, piece by piece, not with billion-dollar plans, not with arrogance, but with quiet work, humble choices, and acceptance that wisdom has no age. Sometimes he walked near the school building, watching children laugh, but he never went inside. He always stayed on the sidewalk, listening to tiny voices from a distance. One afternoon, while Lila arranged books near a window, she noticed a man standing outside, looking in. Their eyes met through the glass. She gave him a small, kind smile. Henry placed his hand against his chest for a moment, almost like a silent thank you, and walked away into the warm afternoon air. Years later, the world would talk about the Carter Foundation as one of the greatest education ideas of its time. But Lila never cared about fame. She cared about the one thing her father taught her most. Knowledge means nothing if you don't share it. And every time she picked up a new notebook, every time she spoke in her gentle voice, she carried his lessons forward, past money, past pride, past everything. The world would remember her not because she corrected 2 billionaires, but because she proved something bigger. Wisdom does not care about age. Value does not depend on money. And sometimes the smallest person teaches the biggest lesson.
And if this story touched your heart or opened your eyes, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more powerful real-life stories, and share this with someone who still believes that age decides intelligence.